The radio transmission lasted 11 seconds. A father's voice, hoarse from smoke and fear, crackling through static on emergency frequency 146.52. "This is Marcus Dalton, 1847 Ridgeline Summit Road. Family of 4 trapped. Daughter age 6, severe asthma, out of medication, 24 hours. Fire closing in. GPS coordinates 3, 4.1847, -117.2934. Requesting immediate evacuation. Anyone. Please. My baby girl can't breathe." For 3 days, every adult authority with the power to help had heard similar calls and made calculated decisions. The 911 dispatcher promised help that never came. The helicopter pilot made direct eye contact with a dying child and flew away. The fire marshal listened to that father beg and marked the family Category 3, acceptable risk, because they were bikers living in the mountains instead of wealthy taxpayers in subdivisions. But 3.8 miles northeast, 9 boys, ages 11 to 14, the oldest barely old enough for a learner's permit, heard something different in that transmission. They heard what the adults had stopped hearing: a little girl who was running out of time. What those 9 scouts did next would trigger the largest biker mobilization in Southern California history, expose a fire marshal's class bias to national media, and prove that sometimes the bravest people in a crisis are the ones still young enough to believe that every life has exactly equal value. This is Gideon, Kala, and War Chief's story, and the ending will restore something you might have thought was lost. If those words hit you the way they hit me, subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. Drop your city in the comments and stay with me. Don't let her die, because we're not rich enough to matter. Those were the words Marcus Dalton said into his emergency radio at 1:47 p.m. on Saturday, October 18th, after 3 days of watching his 6-year-old daughter struggle to breathe in a cabin surrounded by wildfire, after 3 separate promises of help that never arrived, after the moment he understood, with the cold certainty of a combat veteran who'd seen systems fail before, that no one was coming to save them. His daughter Kala weighed 43 pounds. She had large hazel eyes currently red from smoke, freckles across her nose and cheeks that were usually adorable but now disappeared under ash smudges, and a purple unicorn t-shirt with grass stains she'd gotten from playing in the yard 4 days ago, when this was still supposed to be a fun family camping trip. She was clutching an empty asthma inhaler in both hands, shaking it every few minutes, even though she knew it was empty, even though her 6-year-old brain understood on some level that the medicine that kept her alive was gone and wasn't coming back. Her breathing sounded like this: wheeze, pause, wheeze, pause, a wet rattling sound audible from 10 feet away. Every 30 to 45 seconds, she coughed, a productive cough bringing up dark mucus that meant the smoke was deep in her lungs now. Her lips showed a slight blue tint. Her fingernails showed a slight blue tint at the base. Both signs meant the same thing: not enough oxygen reaching her blood. Marcus knew what those signs meant, because he'd been a combat medic in Iraq before he was a construction worker, before he was a Hell's Angels road captain, before he was a father sitting in a stone fireplace alcove, with wet blankets hung as curtains and ash falling outside like heavy snow. He knew Kala had maybe 90 minutes before the oxygen deprivation caused brain damage. He knew the rate of decline, 2 to 3% blood oxygen per hour in these smoke conditions. He knew that by 4:00 p.m., his little girl, who loved unicorns and Frozen and learning to read chapter books and telling knock-knock jokes that never made sense, would either be rescued or she'd be gone in a way they couldn't fix. And he knew, with absolute clarity, that the system designed to save her had classified his family as not worth the risk. 3.8 miles northeast, at Pine Valley Campground, 14-year-old Gideon Beaumont was teaching 8 younger Boy Scouts how to read topography maps. See that elevation? He pointed to ridgeline summit on the map spread across the picnic table, his finger tracing the contour lines. 6,400 feet. In a wildfire, you want high ground. Fire burns uphill faster because heated air rises. But high ground has sparse vegetation and natural fire breaks. Anyone caught at ridgeline would be relatively safe if they can shelter properly, and if they have supplies, and if help arrives before the fire jumps containment. Gideon had a burn scar on his left forearm from a campfire accident when he was 11, the exact reason he taught fire safety now, why he'd earned his fire safety merit badge with a 98% score, why he understood that fire wasn't evil, just powerful. You respected it, understood it, worked with it, or it killed you. His scout uniform shirt was tan, with short sleeves rolled to his elbows. His cargo shorts had pockets full of gear, compass, multi-tool, first aid kit. His wide-brimmed campaign hat sat on the table next to the map. His merit badge sash lay over the back of his chair. 27 badges earned over 7 years in scouting, each one representing skills he'd learned not for patches on fabric, but for moments exactly like, guys, quiet. Wade Notwell, 13 years old, radio operator, froze with his hand on the emergency radio headset he wore around his neck like jewelry. The other scouts stopped talking mid-sentence. Wade had that look, the one he got when something on the airwaves wasn't routine traffic. Emergency frequency, Wade said quietly. Then Marcus Dalton's voice filled the clearing. Anyone on this frequency. This is Marcus Dalton. 1847 Ridgeline Summit Road. Family of 4 trapped by wildfire. Daughter age 6, severe asthma, out of medication, 24 hours. Wife has burns. I have broken ankle. Fire closing in from west and north. Estimate 2 to 3 hours until structure is compromised. GPS coordinates 34.1847, minus 117.2934. Requesting immediate evacuation. Anyone, please. My baby girl can't breathe. Silence. 9 Boy Scouts frozen in place, staring at a radio speaker, listening to a father beg strangers to save his daughter, because the people whose job it was to save her had decided she didn't matter enough. 11-year-old Arlo Jensen grabbed the topography map and spread it flat, his ADHD-fueled energy suddenly laser-focused. His finger found the coordinates in 3 seconds. Ridgeline Summit. Right here. He pointed. That's 3.8 miles southwest of our position. Gideon was already leaning over the map, measuring with his finger against the scale. His brain was calculating. Elevation change, terrain difficulty, fire progression, time required. Boys, pack up. That was Scoutmaster Dale Peterson, 44 years old, adult leader, standing and reaching for his backpack with the kind of urgency that meant evacuate now. Questions later. We're leaving camp immediately. Fire's spreading too fast to stay here. Everyone grab your gear. We move in 5 minutes. But Gideon wasn't moving. He was staring at the map. At that dot labeled Ridgeline Summit. At the distance, 3.8 miles. At the topography, Pinecrest Ridge created a natural fire break if you approached from the northeast, moving parallel to the fire line instead of through it. Mr. Dale, Gideon said quietly, still looking at the map. We can get there. Gideon, no. Dale's voice went sharp. Absolutely not. That's an active fire zone. We evacuate away from fire, not toward it. That's basic wilderness safety. You know that. Wade was still holding the radio, his hand white-knuckled on the casing. He said his daughter can't breathe. 6 years old. Levi Hawthorne, 13, First aid merit badge, thick black-framed glasses, red hair. Had his first aid kit already open in his lap, checking supplies with the meticulous focus he brought to every medical situation. Severe asthma without medication in smoke conditions. He was calculating, his lips moving slightly. She has maybe 2 to 3 hours before respiratory failure. Less if she's already been without her inhaler for 24 hours. Maybe 90 minutes. Fletcher Morrison, 12, fire safety merit badge, stocky build, black hair perpetually messy, was studying the map with the same intensity his wildland firefighter grandfather had taught him. Fire's coming from west and north. If we approach from northeast, his finger traced a path. We use Pinecrest Ridge as natural fire break. The geology creates a natural corridor here, granite exposure, sparse vegetation. We'd be moving parallel to the fire line, not directly through it. It's possible. This isn't a discussion. Dale's voice went harder, the voice of an adult who'd been responsible for children's safety for 19 years and wasn't about to risk 9 of them in a wildfire. I'm responsible for your safety. We evacuate now. That's an order. And that's when Gideon stood up. Slowly. He looked at Dale, then at his 8 scouts, Levi with his first aid kit, Fletcher with his fire knowledge, Wade with his radio, Arlo with his navigation gift, Monty with his search and rescue training, Rowan with his wilderness survival skills, Emmett with his emergency preparedness mind, Colt with his climbing expertise. Then Gideon spoke. Not loud, not angry, just certain. Mr. Dale. 4 years ago, my father died, because someone who could have helped him didn't. The clearing went completely silent. The scouts knew Gideon's story. Everyone in Troop 47 knew, but he rarely spoke about it this directly. A crane operator saw a cable fraying, had 90 seconds to hit the emergency stop and evacuate workers. He didn't stop work because the delay would cost overtime pay, and his supervisor would be angry. The cable snapped. The crane collapsed. My dad died instantly, along with 2 other workers. Gideon's voice stayed steady, but his hands weren't. They were gripping the edge of the picnic table. I was 10 years old when I buried him, and I promised myself that day I would never be that person. I would never know someone needed help and walk away because it was inconvenient or dangerous, or because someone in authority told me not to get involved. He looked at the radio where Marcus's voice had been. There's a 6-year-old girl 3.8 miles from here, dying, because every adult authority abandoned her. Fire marshal won't help. Evacuation teams won't help. Her father is begging anyone who can hear him. We can hear him. We can reach her. We have the skills. First aid, fire safety, wilderness survival, search and rescue, communications, orienteering, emergency preparedness, climbing. We have the training. Every merit badge we ever earned. This is why we earned them. Not for a patch on our sash. For this moment. He looked at his 8 scouts. A scout is helpful. A scout is brave. A scout is loyal. We don't abandon people because it's dangerous or inconvenient. We don't walk away because someone in authority tells us to. That little girl's name is Calla. She probably has a favorite stuffed animal. She probably started 1st grade this year. She probably tells knock-knock jokes that don't make sense. And she's going to die today, if we do nothing. His voice dropped, absolutely certain. I'm going. Anyone who wants to come with me, grab your gear. Anyone who doesn't, I understand, and I'll see you back home. But I'm going. On my honor, I'm going. For 5 seconds, nothing moved. Then Levi Hawthorne stood first, grabbed his first aid kit, walked to stand next to Gideon without saying a word. Fletcher Morrison stood, grabbed fire blankets and safety gear, positioned himself at Gideon's left. Wade Notwell checked his radio battery, tightened his headset strap, stood behind Gideon. One by one, all 8 scouts stood and gathered their gear. No discussion, no debate. They moved as one unit, like they'd been waiting their entire lives for this moment. The exact sequence looked like this. Levi positioned himself at Gideon's right, adjusting his first aid kit strap. Fletcher at Gideon's left, fire safety equipment secure, Wade behind Gideon, hand already on the radio transmit button. Arlo unfolded the full topography map, his finger already tracing the safest route. Monty checked his watch, calculating timeline. Rowan tested wind direction with a wet finger, reading the air. Emmett divided emergency supplies into 9 equal packs. Colt secured climbing rope to his belt, ready for obstacles. Then they spoke, one by one, like a roll call. Levi. The Scout Oath says help other people at all times. Not when it's safe. Not when adults approve. At all times. Fletcher. My grandfather fought wildfire for 29 years. He always said, fire takes the people nobody fights for. We're fighting. Arlo, the quietest scout, now firm. Everyone says I'm too young to make a difference. Today, I prove them wrong. Monty. Search and rescue training, Step 1. Locate the victim. Step 2. Extract the victim. There is no Step 3 that says, unless it's hard. Rowan. My grandfather taught me, the land provides for those who respect it. The land will protect us today because our intent is pure. Emmett. I calculated the risks. Yes, we could die. But she will die if we don't try. The math is easy. Colt, youngest, voice cracking but determined. Everyone always treats me like I'm too little. Today, I'm big enough. Wade, last to speak, hand on radio. I'm calling them. They need to know we're coming. Gideon nodded to Wade. Make the call. Wade pressed the transmit button, his radio operator call sign ready. Ridgeline Summit, this is Scout Troop 47, Pine Valley Campground. We copied your distress call. We're 3.8 miles northeast of your position. We're coming to you. Over. Long pause. Radio static. The sound of wind and distant fire. Then Marcus's voice came back, thick with disbelief. Scout Troop? Did you say Scout Troop? How many of you? Wade. 9 scouts, sir. Ages 11 to 14. We have first aid, fire safety, wilderness survival, search and rescue training. We're equipped, we're trained, and we're coming. ETA approximately 90 minutes. Over. Marcus's voice broke. Son, boys, you're kids. This fire it's dangerous. You could die out here. Gideon took the radio from Wade. Mr. Dalton, my name is Gideon Beaumont. I'm 14, senior patrol leader of Troop 47. 4 years ago, my father died because the person who could have saved him chose not to. I promised myself I'd never be that person. Your daughter, what's her name? A long pause. Then crying now. Calla. Her name is Calla. Calla is 6 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her, and today, 9 scouts are going to make sure she gets to live it. We have a route planned using Pinecrest Ridge as fire break. We'll approach from northeast, we'll get there, we'll stabilize your family, and we'll figure out extraction. But you need to know, we are coming. You are not alone anymore. Marcus. Gideon, why? Why would you risk everything for strangers? Gideon looked at his 8 scouts, standing ready, then back at the radio. Because you're not strangers, Mr. Dalton. You're a father protecting his family. My dad was protecting me when he died. That makes you the same as him. And if 9 scouts can give Kala what I couldn't give my dad, a chance to go home with her father, then every risk is worth it. We're leaving now. Keep this frequency open. We'll update you every 20 minutes. And Mr. Dalton, tell Kala the scouts are coming. Tell her to hold on just a little longer, because we don't leave people behind. Ever. Then Gideon did something he'd never done in 7 years of scouting. He took off his scout neckerchief, the blue and gold one, the one his father had given him when he first joined Cubs at age 7, the one he'd worn to his father's funeral, and held it up for all 8 scouts to see. My dad wore this when he was a scout. He taught me that this, he held the neckerchief higher, means you stand for something bigger than yourself. Today, we prove it. All 9 scouts reached out and touched the neckerchief. Then Gideon tied it to the strap of his backpack where it would be visible the entire journey. On my honor, Gideon said quietly, we bring them home. All of them. All 8 scouts, in unison. On our honor. Then they began hiking. Double time. Toward the fire. Behind them, Scoutmaster Dale Peterson watched them go for exactly 7 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. This is Dale Peterson, Scoutmaster Troop 47. I need you to contact the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Inland Empire Chapter. Tell them 9 Boy Scouts just went into a wildfire to save one of their brothers. Tell them Marcus Ironside Dalton needs backup. And tell them, his voice went hard, tell them, if those boys die doing the right thing while your system sits on its hands, I'll make sure everyone knows you failed them. The hike began at 2:03 p.m. Arlo led navigation, map in one hand, compass in the other, calling out terrain changes every 30 seconds. Bearing 225 degrees, elevation rising, ground stable. Next checkpoint, granite outcrop at 600 meters. Fletcher walked second, reading fire behavior. Winds shifting southwest. That's good. Pushes fire parallel to our route, not across it. Smoke density increasing, but breathable. We stay below the ridgeline where air is clearer. Gideon walked third, setting pace. Not too fast. They needed to arrive functional, not exhausted. Not too slow. Kala had 90 minutes. The rest of the scouts maintained formation, Levi monitoring everyone's physical condition, Wade updating Marcus every 15 minutes, Monty watching for obstacles, Rowan identifying safe zones, Emmett tracking supply consumption, Colt ready to climb or scout ahead. They moved like a machine, like brothers. At 2:19 p.m., 16 minutes into the hike, Wade transmitted, Ridgeline Summit, Troop 47, currently 0.9 miles from your position. ETA 74 minutes. How's Kala? Over. Marcus's voice came back strained. Her breathing's worse. Respiratory rates up to 38 breaths per minute. Lips are darker blue. She's asking for her mom to make it stop. A pause. She's 6. She doesn't understand why we can't help her. Gideon took the radio. We're moving as fast as we can, Mr. Dalton. Tell Kala the scouts are coming. Tell her we're bringing medicine. Tell her to count to 110 times, and we'll be there. 1100 seconds. 18 minutes. That was the promise. They hiked faster. At 2:34 p.m., exactly 91 minutes before Kala would hit critical oxygen threshold, something happened that would change everything. Wade's radio crackled. Not Marcus's voice. A different voice. Older. Gravelly. Controlled anger underneath calm words. Scout Troop 47, this is Hank Dalton, call sign War Chief, President of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Inland Empire Chapter. Marcus is my nephew. You're hiking into a wildfire to save his family. Is that correct? Over. Gideon took the radio. Yes, sir. 9 scouts. ETA 67 minutes to Ridgeline Summit. We have medical supplies, fire safety equipment, and emergency rations. We'll stabilize the family and coordinate extraction. Over. A long pause. Then, son, I'm 58 years old. Army Ranger, Vietnam. Been in this club 43 years. Led 3 missing child searches that police abandoned. Found all 3 kids alive. I've seen brave. I've seen loyal. I've seen brothers ride into hell for each other. But 9 kids, ages 11 to 14, running into wildfire to save my family? That's the bravest thing I've witnessed in 5 decades. Another pause. Longer. Here's what's happening. I'm making a call right now. Code Black. Family emergency. Minors in danger. Within 30 minutes, every brother within 50 miles will be rolling toward Ridgeline. We'll have fire trucks, medical equipment, water tankers, bulldozers for fire breaks. We'll have numbers. And when you bring my family out of that fire, we'll be there to make sure they stay safe. Gideon's throat went tight. Sir, we're just trying to help. I know. That's why we're coming. Because if 9 boys between 11 and 14 can do what every adult authority failed to do, the least we can do is back you up. War Chief out. The radio went silent. Gideon looked at his 8 scouts. They'd all heard. Fletcher said quietly, "We're not alone anymore." "We were never alone," Gideon said. "We had each other." They kept hiking. Meanwhile, 23 miles southwest, Hank War Chief Dalton stood in the parking lot of the Hells Angels Inland Empire clubhouse. Phone in his left hand. His prosthetic left hand, the one he'd lost in a motorcycle accident in 1987, the custom one that attached to his throttle, and made the call. The phone tree worked like this. War Chief called the Sergeant-at-Arms. Sergeant called the Road Captain. Road Captain sent the group text. The group text went out at 2:37 p.m. 3 words, Angel down, Ridgeline. By 2:48 p.m., 58 members of Inland Empire Chapter had responded. Route. By 3:11 p.m., 41 members of Riverside Chapter were rolling. By 3:29 p.m., 37 members of San Bernardino Chapter were mobilizing. By 3:44 p.m., 33 members of Victorville Chapter, a chapter that hadn't ridden with Inland Empire in 9 years due to an old territory dispute, a bar fight in 2015 that left 2 members seriously injured and created bad blood that nobody thought would ever heal, heard the call. Their president, a man called Coldwater, made the decision in 30 seconds. 9 kids between 11 and 14 are doing what we should do. Old beef doesn't matter. We ride. 8 independent riders, solo bikers not affiliated with any chapter, heard the emergency call on open frequency and showed up because, if Boy Scouts are risking their lives for a brother, I'm damn well backing them up. I don't need a patch to know right from wrong. Total mobilization. 177 Hells Angels plus support vehicles. The largest single-chapter response in Southern California Hells Angels history. The previous record was 134 brothers for a killed member's funeral in 2019. This broke that record because 9 scouts shamed every adult into action. At 3:07 p.m., Gideon's troop reached the halfway point. Pinecrest Ridge. The granite outcrop rose 30 feet above the surrounding forest, providing a natural fire break exactly as Fletcher had predicted. The fire was visible now, a wall of orange and black half a mile to the west, moving north, parallel to their route. The heat was intense but manageable. The smoke was thick but breathable if you stayed low. The sound was constant, a roar like jet engines, trees cracking like gunshots every few minutes. "Water break," Gideon called. 2 minutes. Check your gear." Levi moved through the group, checking each scout. Monty, you're breathing hard. Doubt, slow it down. Colt, drink more water. You're getting dehydrated. Wade, let me see your hands. Are those blisters? Good. Keep them clean. Wade transmitted. Ridgeline Summit, Troop 47. Halfway point reached. ETA 39 minutes. Status update on Kala. Over. Marcus's voice was barely audible over static. Respiratory rate 41. She's not talking anymore. Just wheezing. Blood oxygen. I'm estimating high 80s based on color. We're close to critical. Please hurry. Levi grabbed the radio. Mr. Dalton, this is Levi Hawthorne, first aid specialist. When we arrive, I'll need you to do exactly what I say. I'm bringing a bag valve mask for manual ventilation, oxygen if we can get it, and medications to open her airways. We will stabilize her, but I need you to stay calm and follow my instructions. Can you do that? Over. Yes, I can do that. Just please hurry. 39 minutes, sir. We're coming. Gideon stood. Let's move. They hiked. At 3:31 p.m., something happened that nobody expected. A news helicopter appeared overhead, not an evacuation helicopter, a media helicopter, drawn by reports of Boy Scouts hiking into wildfire. The cameraman filmed them. 9 boys in scout uniforms moving through smoke and ash with military precision. The footage would be broadcast live within 10 minutes. The footage would go viral within an hour. The footage would force Fire Marshal Warren Terrence to answer questions he'd spent 3 days avoiding. But the scouts didn't know that yet. They just kept hiking. At 3:46 p.m., 8 minutes ahead of schedule, with 44 minutes remaining before Kala hit critical oxygen threshold, Gideon's troop emerged from the tree line and saw the Dalton cabin. It was still standing. Barely. Surrounded by burned trees, ash drifts 3 feet deep, the roof singed black, windows covered with wet blankets. Ridgeline Summit, this is Troop 47, Gideon shouted. We're here! The cabin door opened. Marcus Dalton appeared. 6'2", 217 pounds. Hell's Angels vest over black t-shirt, right ankle grotesquely swollen and purple-black from a fracture. Face covered in soot, eyes red from smoke. He was carrying his daughter. Kala was limp in his arms. Her purple unicorn t-shirt was gray with ash. Her lips were dark blue. Her chest was heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. 43 breaths per minute, well above the critical threshold. Her eyes were half closed. She was dying. Marcus looked at 9 boys in scout uniforms standing in the clearing, backpacks on, gear ready, and his face just broke. You came, he whispered. You actually came. Gideon walked forward. We promised. Scouts don't break promises. Then he turned to his troop and gave the orders. Levi, take Kala. Start medical assessment and stabilization now. Fletcher, check the cabin's structural integrity and fire risk. Wade, contact War Chief. Tell them we have the family and need immediate helicopter medevac. Arlo, scout the area for safe landing zone. Monty, assess Rebecca and Silas. Rowan, find clean water source. Emmett, inventory our supplies and prepare for extended care. Colt, climb to high ground, watch for fire progression. Every scout moved instantly. Levi ran to Marcus, hands already reaching for Kala. Sir, I need to take her. I'm trained. Trust me. Marcus, a man who'd been in combat, who'd led motorcycle clubs, who'd trusted very few people in his life, looked at this 13-year-old boy with thick glasses and a first aid kit, and made a decision in half a second. He handed over his daughter. Levi laid Kala on a blanket Rowan spread instantly. He pulled out a bag valve mask, a medical device for manual ventilation. He positioned it over her nose and mouth. He began squeezing the bag rhythmically, forcing air into her lungs. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release, squeeze, release. Kalla's chest rose and fell with each compression. "I need someone to time me," Levi said calmly. 20 compressions per minute. Count for me." Gideon knelt beside him. 1, 2, 3, 4. For 47 minutes, while the fire raged half a mile away, while news helicopters circled overhead, while 177 Hells Angels motorcycles converged on the location. 13-year-old Levi Hawthorne manually breathed for a 6-year-old girl he'd never met. His arms burned. His back ached. His hands cramped. He never stopped. Not once. Because that's what the First Aid Merit Badge trained him for. Not the patch. This moment, at 3:46 p.m., 8 minutes ahead of schedule, with 44 minutes remaining before Kalla hit critical oxygen threshold, Gideon's troop emerged from the tree line and reached the Dalton cabin. The scouts immediately went to work. Levi stabilizing Kalla with manual ventilation, Fletcher checking structural integrity, Wade coordinating on radio, the others executing their specialized roles with precision. By 3:51 p.m., Kalla was stable. Blood oxygen rising, the immediate crisis contained. But 3.8 miles away, at Highway 18 fire checkpoint, a different kind of crisis was about to begin. Fire Marshal Warren Mitchell. Terrence stood at the Highway 18 barricade, the roadblock controlling access to Ridgeline Summit, wearing his perfectly pressed county fire marshal uniform, polished black boots, American flag lapel pin catching afternoon light. He'd driven here himself 20 minutes ago, not to coordinate rescue operations, not to deploy resources to the Dalton family he'd classified Category 3, defer until resources available. He was here because news cameras were filming, county supervisors were calling, and when a story about 9 Boy Scouts hiking into wildfire started going viral, Warren needed to be seen managing the crisis instead of hiding behind his desk. So he positioned himself at the most visible checkpoint, ready to demonstrate responsible command presence for the cameras. What Warren didn't expect, what he couldn't have anticipated even in his worst bureaucratic nightmares, was the sound that started building at 3:52 p.m. Low at first, distant, like thunder rolling across mountains, then growing, louder, closer, the rumble of 177 motorcycle engines. Warren's head snapped toward the sound. His hand went instinctively to his radio. His mouth opened to call for backup. Then they came around the bend, a river of chrome and leather and controlled power. 177 Hells Angels motorcycles rolling toward the checkpoint in disciplined formation. Not chaos, not a mob, but military precision that would make any Army convoy commander proud. Front row, War Chief, Ironclad, Sandstone, Flintlock, Broadside, the chapter leadership. Behind them, Inland Empire chapter, 58 strong. Behind them, Riverside chapter, 41 brothers. San Bernardino chapter, 37. Victorville chapter, 33. 8 independent riders, all converging on one barricade, all focused on one man. The formation slowed. Engines throttled down, but didn't cut off. A sustained rumble that vibrated through pavement and bone. Warren stood frozen behind the orange and white striped barrier, suddenly understanding exactly how small one bureaucrat looks when facing 177 citizens who'd decided enough was enough. War Chief dismounted first, slowly, deliberately, every movement calculated for the news cameras filming from 50 yards back. He walked toward the barricade. 6'1", prosthetic left hand, full gray beard, eagle tattoo visible on his left forearm. Hell's Angels President patch clear on his vest, not running, not shouting, just walking like a man who had all the time in the world and knew, absolutely knew, that he was on the right side of history. Warren found his voice. The bureaucratic shield. The authority tone. Roads closed. Active fire zone. No civilian access. I'm going to have to ask you all to turn around and... Fire Marshal Terrence. War Chief's voice was quiet, gravelly, absolutely calm. We have 9 Boy Scouts in that fire zone right now, ages 11 to 14, evacuating the family you classified Category 3. They're doing your job. We're here to back them up. Warren's jaw tightened. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I can't authorize civilian entry into an active disaster zone. Liability issues, safety protocols. Ironclad stepped forward, pulling a tablet from his motorcycle saddlebag. October 18th, 11:50 a.m. Ironclad's voice had the flat professional tone of a detective reading evidence. You told Fire Captain Rodriguez to deprioritize Ridgeline Summit, quote, mark them Category 3, defer until resources available. Same day, same time. You deployed 3 engine companies and 2 helicopter units to Meadowbrook Estates. Response time to Meadowbrook, 47 minutes. Response time to Ridgeline, 0. Still waiting. He turned the tablet screen toward Warren and toward the news cameras filming this exchange. Dispatch logs, timestamps, resource allocation orders, all documented. Warren felt his face flush. He shifted tactics, the charm offensive, the reasonable voice, the slight head tilt designed to create rapport. Gentlemen, I understand you're upset, but you have to understand the impossible position I was in. 40 active structure fires, limited resources. I had to make difficult decisions for the greater good of the community. Sometimes that means, how long have you been making those decisions? Ironclad didn't move, didn't raise his voice, just asked the question like a detective who already knew the answer. Warren's charm slipped for half a second. His eyes flicked to the cameras. War Chief took another step closer. Here's what's happening, Marshal. You're going to move that barricade. We're going to extract that family. Cameras are going to film the whole thing. And tomorrow people get to see 177 tax-paying citizens doing what their fire marshal refused to do. Warren tried the legal threat. I have authority over this checkpoint. I have a relationship with the County Board of Supervisors. One phone call ends this conversation. This is intimidation, and I can call them. War Chief gestured to Warren's radio. Right now, on camera. Call your supervisor. Explain why you need backup to stop citizens from rescuing a 6-year-old girl you decided wasn't worth saving. I'll wait. 5 seconds of silence. News cameras rolling. 177 motorcycle engines rumbling. Warren's hand moved toward his radio. Stopped. Moved back to his side. Because calling for backup meant admitting he needed protection from citizens doing the right thing. Meant confirming every accusation. Meant the end of his career happening live on television instead of in a closed-door suspension hearing. War Chief's voice went quieter. Harder. I'm not asking for authorization, Marshal. I'm giving you a choice. Move the barricade and pretend you're cooperating. Or keep it closed and explain to those cameras, live right now, why 177 tax-paying citizens need to do your job because you decided a 6-year-old girl wasn't worth the paperwork. He paused. Let the weight sit. Your choice. But choose fast, because those 9 scouts, they're running out of time, and unlike you, we don't calculate whether people are worth saving based on their address. Warren looked at the barricade, at the cameras, at 177 faces watching him with the kind of patient intensity that said they would stand here all day if necessary. He'd built a career on careful calculations, property values, political influence, resource optimization, liability management. He'd convinced himself it was rational, efficient, smart leadership. But in this moment, standing between one orange and white barrier and 177 people who'd decided mercy mattered more than bureaucracy, all those calculations meant nothing. His hands shook as he radioed the checkpoint deputy. "Open the barricade." The deputy, a young county fire officer who'd been watching this whole exchange with wide eyes, hesitated. "Sir, the protocols say—" "I said open it!" Warren's voice cracked. "Now!" The deputy dragged the barrier aside, and 177 motorcycles rolled through. The sound was deafening. Engines roaring in unison, chrome gleaming despite smoke-filtered sunlight, a river of leather and steel and brotherhood flowing past the man who'd decided they didn't matter. War Chief rode past first, making eye contact with Warren for just 1 second. Not triumph, not anger, just acknowledgement. You made your choice. We made ours. Then ironclad, then sandstone, then flintlock, then broadside, then 58 brothers from Inland Empire, then 41 from Riverside, then 37 from San Bernardino, then 33 from Victorville, the chapter that hadn't ridden with Inland Empire in 9 years. Old feuds forgotten, because 9 scouts had reminded them what actually mattered. Then 8 independent riders who'd shown up because they believed in backing the people, doing the right thing. Warren stood there, barricade open, watching them disappear toward Ridgeline Summit. Every camera filmed it. Every news outlet would replay it within the hour. The moment Fire Marshal Warren Terrence's career ended wasn't when he got suspended. It was right here, watching ordinary citizens do the job he'd refused to do, while he stood powerless to stop them, his authority exposed as nothing more than an orange and white barrier that moved when someone finally called his bluff. Behind him, a reporter's voice cut through the engine noise. "Fire Marshal Terrence, can you explain why civilian bikers are responding to a family you classified as low priority?" Warren didn't answer. He walked back to his county vehicle, got in, and drove away while cameras filmed his retreat. At 4:02 p.m., 10 minutes after the checkpoint confrontation, 17 minutes after the scouts had stabilized Calla, 177 motorcycles arrived at the clearing outside the Dalton cabin. The scouts had done their job perfectly. Levi was still maintaining manual ventilation for Calla, 47 minutes into compression cycles that would make most licensed paramedics quit. Fletcher had assessed fire risk. Wade had coordinated communications. The family was stable. But now, they weren't alone. Marcus Dalton, Hell's Angels road captain, combat veteran, father who'd spent 3 days watching his daughter die while the system abandoned them, looked up from where he knelt beside Calla and saw what Warren Terrence had tried to prevent. 177 brothers, not with violence, not with chaos, with fire trucks, water tankers, medical equipment, bulldozers for fire breaks, and the kind of disciplined coordination that comes from years of riding together, working together, protecting each other. War Chief dismounted and walked directly to Gideon Beaumont, who was still kneeling beside Levi, still counting compressions. War Chief knelt to Gideon's level, made eye contact. "You're Gideon." "Yes, sir." "You're 14. "Yes, sir." You and 8 other kids just did what every adult authority in this county refused to do. You hiked 3.8 miles into an active wildfire because you heard a little girl needed help. Is that correct? We heard someone ask for help, sir. We had the skills to provide it. The decision was simple. War Chief pulled out a folded blue bandana from his vest pocket, the kind bikers wore on long rides. This belonged to my father. He wore it when he rode Route 66 in 1952. He taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by what he says or how he looks. It's measured by what he does when someone needs help and no one's watching. He handed it to Gideon. You wear this. You earned it. And when people ask where you got it, because they will, you tell them a Hell's Angel gave it to a Boy Scout because that scout understood something most adults forget. Every life has exactly equal value, and if you can help, you must help. Then War Chief stood, turned to his brothers, and gave orders. Ironclad, coordinate helicopter medevac, priority treatment for Kala. Sandstone, you're our medic. Take over from Levi. Assess the whole family. Prepare for transport. Flintlock, contact news outlets. Make sure they understand what these scouts did and what the fire marshal didn't do. Broadside, documentation, timeline, radio transcripts, dispatch logs, everything. Every brother moved instantly. At 4:11 p.m., the medevac helicopter landed. Sandstone had taken over from Levi, allowing the exhausted 13-year-old to finally rest. Kala's blood oxygen, 94%. Respiratory rate, 28 breaths per minute, and improving. Color returning to lips. You stabilized her perfectly, Sandstone told Levi quietly. Medical-grade technique. If you'd been 5 minutes later, she'd be brain damaged or dead. You saved her perfectly. They loaded Kala, Rebecca, and Silas onto the helicopter. Marcus, ankle fractured, was carried on a stretcher by 4 brothers. Before they loaded him, Marcus grabbed Gideon's hand. I was wrong. When I heard scout troop, I thought you were kids playing hero. You're not kids. You're better than most adults I've met. The helicopter lifted off at 4:17 p.m. and every news station in California broadcast the same footage. 9 Boy Scouts covered in ash and soot, exhausted but standing tall, surrounded by 177 Hell's Angels, who'd formed a protective circle around them after forcing a fire marshal to move a barricade on live television. At 4:34 p.m., Warren Terrence sat at his desk at San Bernardino County Fire Command Center, watching the news coverage replay on 3 different screens. The checkpoint confrontation, the barricade opening, 177 motorcycles rolling through while he stood helpless. The caption on every screen, Bikers force fire marshal to allow rescue after 9 Boy Scouts enter fire zone. His phone had rung 47 times in the last hour. County supervisor, mayor, state fire marshal, 3 news networks, his brother Douglas, his wife, his lawyer. At 4:41 p.m., his office door opened. 4 men walked in. War Chief, Ironclad, Flintlock, and Daniel Kowalski, the retired fire captain who'd worked under Warren for 6 years and seen the bias pattern and stayed silent and was done staying silent. Warren stood, tried one more time. Gentlemen, this is a restricted area. Sit down, Warren. Ironclad, not a threat, a statement. Warren sat. Ironclad laid a folder on the desk. 4 years of dispatch logs, 73 emergency calls from working-class areas, average response time, 8.4 hours. Wealthy areas, 51 minutes. Patterns clear. Daniel Kowalski spoke quietly, sadly. Warren, I saw you redirect crews from poor neighborhoods to rich ones 3 times. I reported it. I was told to stay in my lane. Those 9 scouts didn't stay in their lane. They went straight through fire. I'm testifying now. To everyone who'll listen. Warren's phone rang. He answered reflexively. Warren, this is County Supervisor Chen. State Fire Marshal is opening an investigation. FBI is reviewing your records. You're suspended effective immediately. Retain legal counsel. The call ended. Warren sat there, surrounded by 11 years of commendations and awards, watching his career collapse. At 5:03 p.m., county security arrived to escort him from the building. He packed his personal items in a cardboard box while the four men watched in silence. The last thing he packed was his nameplate: Fire Marshal Warren M. Terrence. It didn't mean anything anymore. Warren sat there, surrounded by 11 years of commendations and awards, watching his career collapse. At 5:03 p.m., county security arrived to escort him from the building. He packed his personal items in a cardboard box while the four men watched in silence. The last thing he packed was his nameplate: Fire Marshal Warren M. Terrence. It didn't mean anything anymore. But Warren Terrence wasn't the whole story. He was just the visible face of a system that had been failing families for years. And as the brothers walked out of that office, Ironclad was already pulling files that would reveal exactly how deep the rot went. At 6:17 p.m., at the Hells Angels Inland Empire Clubhouse, 23 brothers gathered in the main room for an emergency church meeting. Church equals club meeting, sacred time, no phones, no interruptions, just brothers and truth. War Chief stood at the head of the table. Ironclad sat to his right with a laptop and 3 folders. Broadside sat to his left with his own laptop, already pulling county records. "Warren's suspended," War Chief said. "But suspension isn't accountability. We need to understand the full scope. How long has this been happening? How many families were deprioritized? And who else enabled it?" Ironclad opened his first folder. "I pulled 4 years of Warren's dispatch logs and cross-referenced them with emergency calls. Found a pattern." He turned his laptop so everyone could see the spreadsheet. "Last 4 wildfire seasons. 73 emergency calls from working class or remote areas. Average response time, 8.4 hours. 17 of those calls resulted in property loss. 4 resulted in injuries. And," he paused, "1 resulted in a death." The room went completely silent. Broadside pulled up a news article on his screen. September 2021. Maria Santos, 68 years old, lived in a cabin at Valley Oaks, 4 miles from Ridgeline Summit. Wildfire jumped containment. She called for evacuation assistance. Fire Marshal's office classified her as Category 3. Response time, 11 hours. By the time crews arrived, her cabin was gone. They found her body in what was left of her bedroom. Official cause of death: smoke inhalation and thermal injuries. Official finding: tragic but unavoidable given resource constraints during peak fire activity. He pulled up another document. Here's the thing. Maria Santos called for help at 2:14 p.m. on September 9th. At the exact same time, Warren deployed 3 engine companies and 2 helicopter units to Canyon Ridge Estates, a luxury development 8 miles south. Response time to Canyon Ridge, 47 minutes. 0 casualties. 0 property loss. Tank, construction foreman, 44 years old, wearing his cut over a work shirt, spoke quietly. He chose. He had resources. He chose to save the rich neighborhood and let the old woman die. Ironclad nodded. And it gets worse. Maria Santos had a life insurance policy, $58,000. Beneficiary, her son, Miguel Santos, who was her caretaker and lived with her. 2 weeks after her death, Miguel tried to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the county, claiming negligent emergency response. The lawsuit was dismissed. Reason: resource allocation during emergency events is protected by qualified immunity. Fire Marshal's decisions cannot be second-guessed in hindsight. Flintlock, the former teacher, the speaker, leaned forward. So Warren's pattern didn't start with Marcus. It's been running for years, and the legal system protected him because emergency response decisions are shielded from liability. Exactly. Ironclad closed that folder and opened another. And here's the second victim reveal. I found the documentation of another deprioritization from 2019. Riverside Terrace Mobile Home Park. Fire approaching. 43 families called for evacuation assistance. Warren classified the entire park as Category 3 and diverted all available units to Sunset Hills. Luxury homes, average value $1.2 million each. Riverside Terrace lost 18 mobile homes. 3 families were injured. One child, 7 years old, named Daniel Ortega, suffered severe smoke inhalation and permanent lung damage. He pulled up medical records. Daniel's medical bills, $137,000 over 3 years. His family couldn't pay. They went bankrupt. And when they tried to sue the county for negligent response, the same thing happened. Dismissed under qualified immunity. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle idled and cut off. And every man in that room understood, without saying it out loud, that they weren't just trying to protect Marcus's family. They were trying to stop something that had already killed before, and would kill again, if nobody intervened. At 7:03 p.m., Ironclad and Flintlock drove to a small house in San Bernardino to visit a man named Robert Palmer. Robert Palmer was 62 years old. He'd worked in the San Bernardino County Emergency Services Department for 28 years as a logistics coordinator, the person who tracked resource deployment during emergencies. He'd retired 6 months ago. He'd seen Warren's patterns for years and stayed silent because speaking up would have cost him his pension. But 9 Boy Scouts had shamed him into action. When Ironclad and Flintlock knocked on his door, Robert answered wearing reading glasses and a cardigan, looking like someone's grandfather, not like someone who'd enabled systematic bias for years. "I've been expecting you," Robert said quietly. "I saw the news. Those scouts did what I should have done 10 years ago." They sat in his living room. Robert offered coffee. They declined. This wasn't a social call. Ironclad laid out the evidence: dispatch logs, response times, demographic patterns. "We know Warren created the bias," Ironclad said. "What we need to know is who enabled him, who signed off on his resource allocation protocols, who protected him when complaints were filed." Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. "I've been keeping records," he said, "just in case. Copies of memos, emails, complaints. I told myself I was documenting for eventual accountability. The truth is I was covering my own liability while people suffered." He opened the folder. Warren's resource allocation policy, the one that prioritized high-value properties, was reviewed and approved by Deputy County Administrator Patricia Vance in 2019. She knew what it meant. She signed off anyway because the county board wanted fire protection focused on areas that generated the most tax revenue. He pulled out an email chain. When Daniel Ortega's family tried to sue in 2020, Patricia personally intervened with the county attorney's office to ensure the case was dismissed quickly and quietly. She didn't want it going to trial because discovery would expose the prioritization patterns. He pulled out complaint records. Over 4 years, 17 formal complaints were filed against Warren's emergency response patterns. 12 from residents of deprioritized areas. 5 from county fire personnel who disagreed with his classifications. Every single complaint was reviewed by Patricia Vance's office. Every single one was dismissed as operational discretion protected by emergency response protocols. Flintlock took the documents carefully. "Why are you telling us this now?" Robert's voice broke. "Because I watched 9 children do what I was too afraid to do. I'm 62 years old. I've got my pension, my house, my retirement. And those kids risked their lives because they believed helping someone mattered more than protecting themselves. I don't get to call myself a good person while staying silent anymore. Ironclad stood. We'll need you to testify, formally, to the state fire marshal and possibly the FBI. I know. I'm ready. As they left, Robert said quietly, "Tell those scouts. Tell them they didn't just save one family. They saved my soul." At 8:34 p.m., a woman named Special Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI field office in Los Angeles arrived at the Hells Angels clubhouse. She was 41 years old, wearing a dark blazer and practical shoes, carrying a briefcase, looking exhausted in a way that coffee no longer touched. War Chief met her at the door, didn't smile, didn't extend his hand. Just, "You're the FBI. Special Agent Mitchell, I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Depends on what you're investigating." Fire Marshal Warren Terrence, emergency resource allocation patterns, potential civil rights violations based on economic discrimination. War Chief looked at Ironclad. A decision was made without words. "Come inside." In the main room, Ironclad laid out everything. Dispatch logs, demographic analysis, Maria Santos's death, Daniel Ortega's injuries, Patricia Vance's enabling emails, Robert Palmer's testimony. Agent Mitchell reviewed each document. Her expression shifted. She stopped writing, set her pen down, leaned forward slightly. "This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 8 months, she said. "We had the statistical pattern, response time disparities across income demographics. We didn't have the internal documentation showing intent and enablement." War Chief stated one condition. Calla Dalton and her family get a victim advocate assigned before any interviews. Nobody talks to them without their consent. And whatever charges you file against Warren or Patricia, you file them within 30 days, not after months of bureaucracy. Agent Mitchell looked at this 58-year-old biker, Army Ranger tab, prosthetic hand, club president vest, and recognized someone who'd negotiated with authority before and knew exactly what he was asking for. "I can agree to victim advocate assignment. Charges timeline depends on evidence authentication, but I'll push for expedited review. You have my word, War Chief. That's the job." After Agent Mitchell left, Flintlock pulled up the final scope reveal on Broadside's laptop. The numbers: 4 years of systematic deprioritization. 73 working-class families classified Category 3-1 death. Maria Santos, 2021. 4 injuries requiring hospitalization, including Danielle Ortega. Estimated property damage: $2.8 million in destroyed homes that could have been saved with timely response. Total response time, disparity. Wealthy areas averaged 51 minutes, working-class areas averaged 8.4 hours. Charges to be filed, per FBI investigation. Civil rights violations under color of law, federal. Willful failure to provide equal protection, federal. Conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights, federal, includes Patricia Vance. Obstruction of justice, for dismissing complaints. Misconduct in public office, state. Criminal negligence in Maria Santos' death, state, pending review. War Chief looked at his 23 brothers and said what they were all thinking. For 4 years, a system designed to catch exactly this evil looked the other way. Not because it couldn't see, because it chose not to. Warren Terrence made those choices. Patricia Vance enabled them. Robert Palmer stayed silent. And Maria Santos died while they protected wealthy neighborhoods. He paused. 9 boys between 11 and 14 exposed all of it. Not because they're special, because they hadn't learned yet that some lives are supposed to matter less than others. They heard a little girl needed help, and they ran toward fire. Driftwood, 68 years old, club founder, original member since 1976. Parkinson's disease making his hands shake, but his voice, steady, stood slowly. I've been with this club 48 years. I've seen brave. I've seen loyalty. I've seen brothers ride into hell for each other. But those 9 scouts running into wildfire to save Marcus's family? That's the bravest thing I've witnessed in 5 decades. We owe them a debt we can never fully repay. His hands shook as he gripped the table. But we start by making sure this never happens again. Warren Terrence chose who was worth saving. Those boys proved everyone is worth saving. And we're going to make damn sure the system learns that lesson. The room was silent for 5 seconds. Then every hand went up. Not one dissent. Not one hesitation. 23 men voting unanimously to see this through to the end. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. 3 days after the rescue, at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, Sandstone, the ex-combat medic with the mobile medical RV, wearing his Hells Angels vest over a clean black t-shirt, sat in the pediatric wing waiting room while Kala underwent her follow-up examination. He'd brought something with him, a purple unicorn plush toy, the kind with sparkly horn and rainbow mane, because he'd heard Marcus mention on the radio that Kala loved unicorns. The waiting room chairs were uncomfortable plastic. Sandstone didn't care. He'd sat in worse places waiting for worse news. At 2:47 p.m., Dr. Elena Rodriguez, pediatric pulmonologist, mid-40s, kind eyes, emerged from the examination rooms carrying a clipboard. She saw Sandstone and walked directly to him. "You're the one who maintained manual ventilation in the field for 47 minutes?" "No, ma'am. That was a 13-year-old Boy Scout named Levi Hawthorne. I just took over for the final stretch." Dr. Rodriguez sat down beside him. "Well, that 13-year-old performed medical intervention that saved Kala's life. Her blood oxygen on arrival was 94%, barely safe, but stable. If she'd arrived at 88% or lower, we'd be having a very different conversation about brain damage and long-term cognitive impact." She looked at her chart. "Lung function is recovering well. The smoke damage was significant but not permanent. She'll need breathing treatments for the next 6 weeks, and we're adjusting her asthma management plan, but she'll make a full recovery. No lasting damage, no developmental delays. She'll live a completely normal life." Sandstone's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Dr. Rodriguez looked at this biker, gray beard, weathered face, club vest covered in patches, and said quietly, "Thank you for getting her here when you did. You and those scouts gave her back her future." Sandstone stood, handed her the unicorn plush. "Would you give this to Kala? Tell her it's from the scouts and the brothers. Tell her she's braver than all of us." Dr. Rodriguez took the unicorn, and for just a moment, her professional composure cracked. "I will. And for what it's worth, the world needs more people like you and those boys. People who run toward trouble instead of away from it." Sandstone walked out of the hospital into bright California sunshine, got on his motorcycle, and rode for 20 minutes before he pulled over on a quiet overlook and just sat there, engine off, looking at the mountains where 9 kids had proven that courage doesn't require age or size or authority. Just heart. 5 days after the rescue, Marcus and Rebecca brought Kala and Silas to the Hells Angels Inland Empire clubhouse for dinner. The brothers had prepared a feast: burgers, hot dogs, mac and cheese, fruit salad, cookies shaped like motorcycles and scout emblems. Kala sat at a long picnic table between Gideon and Levi, wearing her purple unicorn t-shirt, freshly washed now, grass stains still visible, but the ash scrubbed away. She ate a cheeseburger slowly, carefully, taking small bites. Nobody rushed her. Nobody took the food away. No timer. No consequence. The sound that had defined her for 3 days, wheeze, pause, wheeze, pause, that wet, rattling cough, was gone, replaced by normal breathing, by laughter when Colt told a terrible knock-knock joke, by the simple sound of a 6-year-old being 6. Halfway through her burger, she looked at Gideon and said, "You're the one who promised to bring me home." "I am. You kept your promise. Scouts always do." She reached into her small ladybug backpack, the same one she'd been wearing when the Scouts arrived, the one that used to hold her empty inhaler, and pulled out a drawing. It was crayon on white paper, 9 stick figures with Scout hats surrounding a small stick figure with yellow hair and a purple shirt. Above them, a sun. Below them, the words in shaky 6-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for saving me." Gideon took the drawing with hands that weren't quite steady. "Kala, this is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. You can keep it forever." "I will. I promise." The smell of burgers on the grill mixed with motor oil and leather, and the particular scent of Brotherhood, the kind that forms when people choose to protect each other instead of themselves. Kala took another bite of her burger, and somewhere in that simple action was everything the Scouts and Brothers had fought for: a child being allowed to be a child, safe and fed, and surrounded by people who'd chosen to care. The Dalton family's mountain cabin was gone, burned to foundation stones when the fire finally jumped containment 2 hours after the helicopter evacuation. Everything Marcus and Rebecca owned, gone. Their trucks, melted metal, their photo albums, Kala's toys, Silas's books, Rebecca's jewelry, Marcus's father's tools. They had nothing except the clothes they'd been wearing and each other. On day 7 after the rescue, War Chief called a special church meeting. "Brothers, Marcus needs housing. His family needs stability. Kala needs to be near her doctors. Silas needs to start school. Rebecca needs to heal. And Marcus can't work construction on a fractured ankle for another 8 weeks minimum." He paused. "Here's what we're doing. The club owns a rental property at 847 Sage Street in San Bernardino. 2-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe and close to Arrowhead Medical Center. We're giving it to Marcus rent-free for 6 months while he recovers and gets back on his feet." Tank, the construction foreman, stood. "I'll coordinate repairs. New furniture, fresh paint. Get it ready in 72 hours. Broadside pulled up his laptop. "I set up a GoFundMe 3 days ago. Help the Dalton family rebuild after wildfire. It's raised $18,300 from 147 chapters across 12 states. Every dollar goes directly to them. No administrative fees, no cuts. Just brothers helping family." Flintlock. "I contacted San Bernardino Unified School District. Kala's enrolled at Lincoln Elementary starting next week. They're aware of her medical needs and have a full-time nurse on staff. Silas is enrolled in the pre-K program at the same school. Transportation arranged." Ironclad. "I filed the paperwork for emergency victim assistance through the county. Marcus qualifies for temporary disability support, $1,100 monthly until he's cleared to work. Rebecca qualifies for employment services if she wants them. And I made sure their case went to the top of the pile instead of the bottom." The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, on a bright Saturday morning, Marcus stood in the doorway of 847 Sage Street, holding the key War Chief had just handed him. The house was small, but perfect. 2 bedrooms painted in soft colors, new furniture, courtesy of Tank's crew, a kitchen stocked with groceries, toys in Kala's room, including 3 unicorn plushies, books in Silas's room, and on the living room wall, a framed photograph. 9 Boy Scouts standing with 177 Hells Angels, bikers, in a clearing surrounded by ash and smoke, arms around each other, exhausted but victorious. Below the photograph, a plaque. To the Dalton family, you are never alone. With love, Troop 47 and the Inland Empire chapter. Marcus stood there with his wife and children, staring at that photograph, and cried for the first time since the fire started. Not from grief, from overwhelming gratitude that in a world full of people who'd walked away, 9 boys and 177 bikers had run toward him instead. 2 weeks after the rescue, the scouts and bikers gathered at Pine Valley Campground, the exact spot where this had all started, for a special ceremony. War Chief stood in front of 9 scouts in full uniform, merit badge sashes gleaming in afternoon sunlight. Gideon Beaumont, Levi Hawthorne, Fletcher Morrison, Wade Notwell, Arlo Jensen, Monty Briggs, Rowan Salazar, Emmett Cho, Colt Rainier, you are hereby granted honorary membership in the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Inland Empire Chapter. You'll never wear our patch because you've already got your own, and it means just as much. But you are our brothers, and if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call, and we answer. That's not charity. That's family. He handed each scout a challenge coin, brass medallion with the Hells Angels emblem on one side and the Boy Scout emblem on the other, engraved with the date, October 18th, 2025. The day courage had 9 names. Then Gideon did something nobody expected. He pulled out the hand-drawn topography map his father had made, the one with annotations in pen, coffee stain in the corner, date September 2018, folded into eighths in a crinkled plastic page protector. He walked to Calla, who was standing beside her father, wearing a new purple unicorn t-shirt and pink sneakers with working Velcro straps this time. He knelt to her level. Calla, this map belonged to my dad. He taught me that heroes aren't special people with superpowers. They're just people who help when help is needed. Your dad's a hero. He kept you alive for 3 days. And you're a hero too, for holding on when it hurt. When you're older, I want you to teach someone else how to read this map. That's how we make sure there are always more heroes than villains. He handed her the map. Calla took it carefully, like the treasure it was. I'll keep it safe forever. I promise. I know you will. Broadside, the tech guy, the youngest of the specialized crew, gave his number to Marcus. Anytime, brother. I mean it. 3 a.m., Tuesday afternoon, doesn't matter. You call, I'm there. Sandstone crouched beside Calla, made eye contact. You keep using those breathing treatments the doctor prescribed. You keep getting stronger. And you remember, that 13-year-old boy who breathed for you for 47 minutes? He didn't give up. You don't give up either. Driftwood, the elder statesman, hands shaking from Parkinson's, but voice steady, placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder. You raised a brave family, Marcus. Your daughter fought to survive. Your son stayed strong. Your wife held everyone together. And you never stopped fighting for them. That's what real strength looks like. The sun was setting over the mountains, the same mountains where 9 boys had run into fire 2 weeks ago. The same clearing where they'd heard a father beg for help and decided that mercy mattered more than safety. Gideon looked at his 8 scouts, then at the 177 bikers who'd backed them up, then at the family they'd all saved together. We did good, he said quietly. War Chief put his hand on Gideon's shoulder. Son, you did more than good. You reminded every adult in this state what courage actually looks like. And some of us needed that reminder. But this story isn't really about Boy Scouts or bikers, or even about Calla. It's about what happens when the people with the least power refuse to accept that powerlessness. It's about what changes when someone finally says, "No, not on my watch, not today." Gideon didn't plan to be at Lincoln Elementary on the morning of November 9th. He was just dropping off supplies for Troop 47's canned food drive. The school was a collection point, when he saw her through the chain-link fence at recess. Calla. Purple unicorn backpack, pink sneakers, playing tag with 3 other first graders. Running, laughing without covering her mouth. Breathing without that wheeze, shuffle, wheeze sound that had defined her for 3 days in October. She saw him, waved enthusiastically, and ran to the fence. "Gideon! Look!" She spun in a circle. "I can run now. Dr. Rodriguez says my lungs are getting so strong." "I can see that. You're fast." "I'm the fastest in my class." She beamed with 6-year-old pride. "And I'm teaching my friend Emma how to read maps. I have Dad's map. I mean your dad's map. And I'm keeping it safe. I put it in a special box with a lock." "That's perfect, Calla. That's exactly what it's for." The recess bell rang. Calla had to go. But before she ran back to her class, she said something that would stay with Gideon for the rest of his life. "My teacher asked what I want to be when I grow up. I said I want to be a scout, because scouts help people even when it's scary." Then she was gone, running across the playground, just another first grader on just another Tuesday. But she wasn't. She was alive because 9 boys had refused to accept that her life mattered less than someone else's. Gideon stood outside that fence for a long moment, watching her disappear into the school building. He pulled out the brass challenge coin War Chief had given him, turned it over in his hand, put it back in his pocket. Then he walked to his bike, a regular bike, not a motorcycle because he was still 14, and rode home through quiet suburban streets, thinking about his father, about Calla, about the difference between being a hero and just being someone who helped when it mattered. February 14th, 2026. Gideon stood on the stage at the San Bernardino Civic Center in his full scout uniform, including the blue bandana War Chief had given him, now worn proudly around his neck, accepting the Medal of Honor from the National Scout Association. 8 other scouts stood beside him: Levi, Fletcher, Wade, Arlo, Monty, Rowan, Emmett, Colt. In the audience, their families, their troop, Fire Marshal Warren Terrence's replacement, a woman named Lisa Chen, who'd already implemented new resource allocation policies requiring medical need to override property value, county officials, news media, and 177 Hells Angels bikers in full dress, cuts polished, chrome gleaming, sitting in respectful silence. The presenter read the citation: "For extraordinary courage and selfless service in rescuing a family of 4 from imminent death during the October 2025 Ridgeline Summit wildfire. Despite significant personal risk, advanced into active fire zone using merit badge training in first aid, fire safety, wilderness survival, and emergency preparedness to successfully evacuate and medically stabilize victims abandoned by official emergency response. Their actions resulted in 0 casualties, exposed systematic bias in emergency resource allocation, and led to policy reforms protecting vulnerable populations statewide." The medal was heavy. Gideon hadn't expected that. But what he really hadn't expected was what happened after the ceremony. A woman approached him, mid-30s, professional clothes, carrying a folder. "Gideon Beaumont?" "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Dr. Sarah Kim. I'm a professor of emergency management at USC. I've been studying your rescue operation for 3 months, the route you chose, the medical interventions, the coordination, the timeline management. I want to incorporate your case into our curriculum as a model for civilian disaster response." She opened her folder. "But more than that, I'm developing a pilot program called Angel's Watch, a partnership between youth organizations like Boy Scouts and community groups like motorcycle clubs to create rapid response networks for emergency situation thunder, where official systems fail or are too slow. I want to train other young people in the skills you used. I want to formalize the kind of community protection you provided. Gideon looked at his 8 scouts standing nearby. They were all listening now. What would you need from us? Your testimony, your training procedures, your decision-making process, and your permission to share your story as proof that this model works. Gideon thought about Calla running on the playground, about Maria Santos dying in 2021 because no one came, about Daniel Ortega's permanent lung damage, about every family that might face the same choice Warren Terrence had made about who was worth saving. You have our permission, and whatever help you need, we'll provide it. Dr. Kim smiled. Thank you. This program could save lives in communities across California, and eventually nationally. And it started because 9 boys heard someone needed help and ran toward the danger instead of away. 3 months later, Angel's Watch launched in 7 California counties. Enrollment in wilderness first aid courses increased 67%. Boy Scout applications in San Bernardino County tripled. Fire departments across the state implemented new protocols requiring medical need and vulnerability assessment to be primary factors in resource allocation. Not property value, not political influence, just human need. Warren Terrence was never criminally charged. The bias wasn't illegal, just morally bankrupt. But he never worked in emergency management again. Last anyone heard, he was selling insurance in Nevada, far from California, far from the judgmental eyes of people who knew what he'd done. Patricia Vance resigned under pressure and accepted a settlement that included permanent ban from public service. Robert Palmer testified to the state fire marshal, the FBI, and eventually Congress about how systematic bias operates in emergency response systems. His testimony led to federal guidelines requiring transparency in resource allocation during disasters. And Calla Dalton, 6 years old when she nearly died, now 7, had stopped counting the days since the fire. She counted different days now. The days since she'd started her breathing treatments, perfect attendance, 0 missed doses. The days since she'd joined the local Girl Scout troop, 47 days, already earned 3 badges. The days until the next Angel's Watch training session, where she'd volunteered to tell her story to other kids learning emergency response. 2 years to the day after 9 scouts ran into wildfire. Calla Dalton, now 8 years old, healthy lungs, no more emergency inhaler needed daily, just a rescue inhaler she carried, just in case, stood in front of a room full of 23 teenagers at the Angel's Watch program orientation. She wore her Girl Scout uniform. She carried the hand-drawn topography map Gideon had given her, still in its plastic protector, still precious, still teaching. "My name is Calla Dalton," she said, voice steady. 2 years ago, I was dying. Fire marshal said my family wasn't worth saving because we lived in a cabin instead of a mansion. He called us acceptable risk. The teenagers, ages 14 to 17, mix of Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and community volunteers, listened without moving. 9 Boy Scouts heard my dad on the radio begging for help. They were 11 to 14 years old. They hiked 3.8 miles into a wildfire because they decided I was worth saving even if the adults didn't think so. She unfolded the map. This map belonged to Gideon Beaumont's father. Gideon gave it to me and told me to teach someone else how to read it. That's how we make sure there are always more heroes than villains. She looked at a girl in the front row, maybe 15, wearing a Girl Scout uniform, looking uncertain and scared. The girl reminded Kala of herself 2 years ago. That combination of terror and hope and exhaustion. The face of someone who'd been failed enough times to stop expecting anything, but hadn't quite given up yet. Kala walked over and knelt beside her chair. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Maya, have you ever needed help and nobody came?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "Then you understand. That's why you're here. Because you know what it feels like to be abandoned, and you've decided nobody else should feel that way. That's how it starts, with one person who decides mercy matters more than convenience." Kala handed her the map. "Read this, learn this, then teach someone else. That's the promise." Maya took the map with shaking hands. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You are. You're here, aren't you? That's the first step." After the orientation, Kala walked outside into bright October sunshine. The same month, different year, safe now, and found Gideon waiting by his car. He was 17 now, senior in high school, already accepted to UC Berkeley for emergency management studies, already wearing the brass challenge coin on a chain around his neck, already planning to spend his life doing exactly what he'd done at 14, helping people the system forgot. "You did great in there," he said. "I learned from the best." They stood together quietly, watching the Angels Watch trainees file out of the building, 23 teenagers who'd just committed to being the kind of people who ran toward trouble instead of away. "Do you ever think about that day?" Kala asked. "October 18th, 2 years ago?" "Every single day." "Me too. But not the scary parts anymore. The good parts. The part where you promised to bring me home, and you kept your promise. The part where 177 bikers showed up because 9 kids shamed them into action. The part where everything changed because you refused to walk away." Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then, "You want to know what I actually think about?" "What?" "I think about my dad. About the crane operator who could have saved him and didn't. And I think, maybe Dad died, so I'd understand what it feels like when someone chooses not to help. Maybe that was the point. So when I heard your dad on the radio, I'd know, with absolute certainty, that I would never be the person who walked away." He looked at Kala. "Your life mattered because every life matters. Not because you're special or important or valuable in some economic sense, just because you're a person who needed help. That's it. That's the whole moral code. And if more people understood that, the world would look completely different." Kala hugged him. Fierce 8-year-old hug, the kind that says thank you in a way words can't quite capture. When she let go, she said, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other people get the same chance I got. That's my promise. I know you will. Because a scout taught me how." That evening, Gideon drove to the cemetery where his father was buried. He did this every October 18th, not out of obligation, but out of need. A private ritual, a moment to remember. David Beaumont's headstone was simple granite. Name, dates, 1 line. "Beloved father and scout leader, always helpful." Gideon sat on the grass beside the stone, pulled out the brass challenge coin, turned it over in his hand like he'd done 1,000 times. "Hey, Dad, it's been 2 years since the fire. Kala's doing great. She's teaching other kids now, just like you taught me. The Angels Watch program is in 12 states now. We've trained over 400 young people in emergency response, and we've successfully responded to 17 situations where official systems were too slow or didn't care." He traced the scout emblem on the coin. "I keep thinking about what you told me when I was 10, right before the accident. You said, being a scout isn't about camping or knots or badges. It's about being someone people can count on when everything goes wrong. It's about running toward trouble instead of away from it. His voice broke slightly. I didn't save you. I was too young, too far away, too powerless. But because I couldn't save you, I understood, with my whole heart, why I had to save Kala. Why walking away wasn't an option. Why mercy matters more than safety. He placed the challenge coin on the headstone. You died because someone chose convenience over courage. Kala lived because 9 boys chose the opposite. And every day, I try to make sure your death meant something by being the person who never makes that first choice, never walks away, never calculates whether someone is worth the risk. The sun was setting. The cemetery was quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle rumbled past. Probably one of the brothers, heading home after a ride. Gideon stood, brushed grass from his jeans, picked up the coin. I love you, Dad, and I'm trying to make you proud. He walked back to his car, thinking about a 6-year-old girl running on a playground, about 8 scouts who'd trusted him to lead them into fire, about 177 bikers who'd proven that scary-looking people can have the gentlest hearts. He was 17 years old. He'd saved one life 2 years ago, but that one life had rippled outward, into programs, into policies, into other lives saved by other people who'd learned that helping mattered more than safety. That was the real victory, not the rescue itself, but what it taught everyone who witnessed it. I want you to stop and think about this story's real lesson. 9 boys, ages 11 to 14. The oldest barely old enough to drive. The youngest still watching cartoons. They didn't have special powers. They didn't have authority. They didn't have resources beyond what fit in their backpacks. What they had was training, courage, and a simple belief. If you can help, you must help. That's it. That's the whole moral code. Now think about the adults. The 911 dispatcher who promised help and didn't send it. The helicopter pilot who made eye contact with a dying child and flew away. The fire marshal who decided some lives were acceptable risk because they didn't generate enough tax revenue. Here's what I need you to understand. There's a Kala in your community right now. Someone who needs help. Someone the system is ignoring. Someone whose life has been deemed not valuable enough. And the question isn't, can I save them? The question is, will I try? You don't need 9 scouts and 177 bikers. You just need to be one person who refuses to walk past someone in need. One person who makes the call, offers the help, speaks the truth, shows the mercy. That's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures, through small choices repeated by ordinary people who decide that mercy matters more than convenience. If this story moved you, if you believe every life has equal value, if you've ever been the person who needed help and didn't get it, or the person who saw someone suffering and wished you'd acted, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Subscribe to this channel. These stories matter. They remind us what courage looks like. 2. Share this video. Not for views, because someone in your life needs to hear that they're worth fighting for. 3. Tell me in the comments, who was your Gideon? Who ran toward you when everyone else walked away? Or who needed a Gideon and never got one? Share your story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to abandon each other. The radio transmission lasted 11 seconds. A father's voice, hoarse from smoke and fear, begging anyone who could hear. My baby girl can't breathe. 9 boys heard. 9 boys acted. 177 bikers backed them up. and a 6-year-old girl who was supposed to die that day is now teaching other children how to read topography maps and save lives. That's the power of refusing to walk away. That's the legacy of October 18th, 2025. That's what happens when courage has 9 names, wears a scout uniform, and proves that the bravest people in a crisis are sometimes the ones still young enough to believe every life matters exactly the same.